The greatest danger is not that you know too little. It is believing you know enough. Imagine waking up every morning inside a prison. Not a prison built from iron bars or concrete walls, but one built from habits. Algorithms decide what you watch. Schools decide what you memorize. Jobs decide what you specialize in. Social media decides what you believe. Every day, thousands of ideas rush through your mind, yet very few of them are truly your own. The modern world celebrates specialization. Become an accountant. Become a programmer. Become a lawyer. Become one thing. And stay there for the rest of your life. At first, it sounds logical. After all, specialists make money. Specialists build careers. Specialists become experts. But there is a hidden cost that almost nobody talks about. The more narrowly you think, the easier you become to replace. Today, artificial intelligence can write code. It can design logos. It can summarize books. It can diagnose diseases. It can even compose music. Every year, another profession discovers that years of specialized knowledge can suddenly be performed by a machine. Yet one type of person continues to rise above everyone else. Not because they know everything, but because they know how everything connects. History has a name for these people. Polymaths. People who refused to live inside one mental box. They studied art and science, politics and psychology, war and philosophy, business and literature. They saw patterns where others saw isolated facts, and because of that, they shaped civilizations. Leonardo da Vinci wasn't remembered simply because he painted the Mona Lisa. He changed anatomy, engineering, architecture, military technology, hydraulics, optics, and art itself. Benjamin Franklin wasn't just an inventor. He was a scientist, a diplomat, a philosopher, a writer, a businessman, a political strategist. The world remembers him because he mastered connections instead of categories. But there was another man, one whose name rarely appears on lists of great polymaths. Yet his understanding of human nature still influences presidents, generals, CEOs, intelligence agencies, negotiators, psychologists, and entrepreneurs. His name was Niccolò Machiavelli. Most people know him for only one book, The Prince. And because of that, they misunderstand him completely. They imagine a ruthless political advisor teaching kings how to manipulate everyone around them. But that image is incomplete. Because Machiavelli wasn't simply studying politics. He was studying the operating system of human beings. Power, fear, ambition, love, loyalty, greed, war, religion, leadership, psychology, history, economics, communication. He wasn't collecting information. He was connecting it. And that is exactly what made him dangerous. To understand why Machiavelli became one of history's greatest thinkers, we have to leave the modern world behind. Travel back more than 500 years. To a city unlike any other. Florence. Around the year 1498, the streets were alive with merchants speaking different languages. Artists painted masterpieces that would survive centuries. Bankers financed kingdoms. Philosophers argued in public squares. Inventors imagined machines no one believed could exist. It was one of the few places in history where curiosity was treated like currency. This was the heart of the Renaissance. A time when Europe slowly emerged from centuries of intellectual darkness. Books were no longer chained inside monasteries. Ideas began moving faster than armies. The printing press allowed knowledge to spread like wildfire. Every new discovery challenged an old belief. And in the middle of this intellectual explosion, a young government official quietly observed everything. Niccolò Machiavelli. Unlike the wealthy elites surrounding him, he wasn't born into extraordinary privilege. He had no army, no throne, no vast fortune. His greatest weapon was attention. While others chased power, Machiavelli chased understanding. He watched ambassadors negotiate peace. He studied generals preparing for war. He observed politicians lying without blinking. He noticed how crowds behaved differently than individuals. He asked questions no one else thought to ask. Why do people obey one leader and rebel against another? Why does fear often defeat love? Why do intelligent civilizations destroy themselves? Why do ordinary people willingly surrender their freedom? These weren't philosophical games. The answers determined who survived and who disappeared from history. One day, Machiavelli met another extraordinary mind, Leonardo da Vinci. Today, Leonardo is remembered as history's greatest genius. But during his lifetime, people often thought he was strange. Why? Because he refused to stay inside one field. While others became painters, Leonardo studied anatomy. While doctors examined bodies, he designed flying machines. While engineers built bridges, he dissected human muscles. While mathematicians solved equations, he experimented with light. To ordinary people, his curiosity looked like distraction. But to history, it became genius. Machiavelli saw something few others noticed. Knowledge becomes exponentially more powerful when different worlds collide. Art improves engineering. Psychology improves politics. History improves leadership. Philosophy improves decision-making. Every discipline strengthens another. Most people spend their lives collecting facts. Polymaths build networks. Today, the opposite is happening. Children are taught to choose one career before they truly understand themselves. Universities divide knowledge into departments that rarely communicate. Companies reward employees who perform one task repeatedly. Social media encourages people to consume information that confirms what they already believe. Everything pushes the human mind towards smaller and smaller boxes. Specialize. Repeat. Obey. Consume. Repeat again. Then wonder why life feels predictable. This isn't an accident. Average thinkers are easier to manage. They rarely challenge systems. They rarely question assumptions. They rarely connect ideas across different fields. And when a crisis appears, they wait for someone else to tell them what to think. A polymath behaves differently. When everyone sees chaos, he searches for patterns. When everyone follows trends, he studies principles. When everyone copies opinions, he investigates reality. That difference changes everything. Because power has never belonged to the people with the most information. Power belongs to the people who understand how information fits together. And centuries before neuroscience, before psychology, before modern leadership books, Machiavelli had already discovered this truth. He wasn't training rulers. He was training observers. People capable of seeing the invisible forces controlling human behavior. People capable of thinking independently, even when the entire world chose comfort over truth. And that is where our story truly begins. Because before you can become a modern polymath, you must first escape the prison of average thinking. 4 years. Machiavelli lived the life most people could only dream of. As second chancellor of the Republic of Florence, he wasn't trapped behind a desk. He traveled across Europe. He negotiated with kings. He watched armies prepare for war. He sat across the table from men whose decisions could erase entire nations. Every journey became another classroom. Every conversation became another experiment. Most politicians listened only for information. Machiavelli listened for patterns. He noticed something strange. The faces changed. The languages changed. The flags changed. But human nature never did. Whether he stood inside a palace in France, a military camp in Italy, or a royal court in Germany, people were still driven by the same invisible forces: fear, pride, ambition, greed, hope, vanity. Centuries passed. Technology evolved. Empires rose and collapsed. Yet people continued making the same mistakes. That realization changed the way Machiavelli learned forever. He stopped memorizing events. Instead, he searched for timeless principles. Because facts grow old, principles survive history. Most people think learning means collecting information. Read another book. Watch another video. Save another podcast. Highlight another page. By the end of the year, they have consumed thousands of ideas. Yet their lives remain exactly the same. Machiavelli understood why. Knowledge without connection is intellectual decoration. Real intelligence begins when different ideas collide. Imagine a military battle teaching you negotiation, a painting teaching you engineering, a failed king teaching you psychology, a philosopher teaching you business. This is how polymaths think. They don't ask, "What subject am I studying?" They ask, "What truth hides inside this subject?" That single question transforms learning. One of the men who fascinated Machiavelli more than anyone else was Cesare Borgia. History remembers Borgia as ruthless, brilliant, terrifying. Many called him a monster. But Machiavelli looked beyond morality. He wanted to understand effectiveness. While others condemned Borgia, Machiavelli observed him like a scientist observing nature. He watched how Borgia entered rebellious cities, how he rewarded loyalty, how he punished betrayal, how he made decisions under impossible pressure. One event became legendary. After conquering Romagna, Borgia appointed a governor known for brutal efficiency. The governor restored order quickly, but his cruelty created hatred among the people. Borgia understood something most rulers never do. Sometimes, the same person who solves your problem becomes your next problem. So one morning, citizens woke to find that governor executed publicly. His body displayed in the town square. The message was unmistakable. Justice had returned. People feared Borgia, but they also admired his decisiveness. Machiavelli wasn't impressed by the violence. He was fascinated by the psychology. Borgia understood perception. Leadership wasn't only about making decisions. It was about shaping how people interpreted those decisions. That lesson still shapes politics, marketing, business, and media today. But Machiavelli never copied anyone blindly. That is another difference between specialists and polymaths. Specialists imitate. Polymaths extract principles. He studied Julius Caesar, not to become Caesar. He studied Alexander the Great, not to become Alexander. He studied Roman senators, Greek philosophers, military commanders, religious leaders, poets, historians. Every person became another puzzle piece. Eventually, a complete picture emerged. Greatness never belonged to those who mastered one skill. It belonged to those who understood how many different skills worked together. Leadership required psychology. Psychology required philosophy. Philosophy required history. History required observation. Observation required curiosity. Everything connected. Centuries later, neuroscientists would discover something remarkable. The human brain becomes more creative when it connects distant ideas. Innovation rarely comes from knowing more than everyone else. It comes from combining ideas nobody else thought belonged together. Machiavelli discovered this without laboratories, without brain scans, without modern science, simply by observing reality. That's why his books still feel modern. He wasn't describing Renaissance Italy. He was describing human nature itself. And human nature changes very slowly. Then, everything collapsed. In 1512, Florence fell. The Republic disappeared. The Medici family returned to power. Machiavelli lost everything. His position, his influence, his income, his future. Soon after, he was arrested, accused of conspiracy, dragged into prison, interrogated, tortured. The man who once advised governments now sat inside a cold stone cell. Most people would have surrendered. Many would have spent the rest of their lives blaming fate. Machiavelli did something different. After his release, he was exiled to a small farm outside Florence. No palace, no political office, no powerful friends, only silence and books. Every morning, he worked with farmers, covered in dust and sweat, living an ordinary life. But every evening, everything changed. He returned home, removed his dirty clothes, put on elegant robes, walked into his study, opened the works of Livy, Tacitus, Plutarch, Cicero, and the ancient Romans. Later he wrote something extraordinary. He said that when he entered his library, he entered the courts of ancient men. He spoke with them, questioned them, learned from them. For 4 hours, he forgot poverty, forgot exile, forgot fear, forgot death itself. Think about that. He had lost power, but not curiosity. He had lost status, but not discipline. The world had taken away his position. It could not take away his mind. That is the defining characteristic of every polymath. They understand that knowledge is portable. No recession can steal it. No government can confiscate it. No employer can fire it. Once knowledge becomes part of your thinking, it belongs to you forever. It was during this period of exile, when almost everyone believed Machiavelli's life was over, that he wrote the book history would never forget, The Prince. Ironically, his greatest work was not created during success. It was created after failure, because failure gave him something success never could. Time to think, time to connect, time to transform decades of observation into timeless principles. That is another lesson modern society often ignores. Busyness is not intelligence. Constant activity is not wisdom. Sometimes, your greatest breakthrough begins only after the world forces you to slow down. And Machiavelli was about to reveal ideas that would influence emperors, generals, business leaders, and powerful minds for the next 500 years. Every generation believes it is smarter than the last. But history tells a different story. Every civilization reaches a point where convenience begins replacing curiosity. People stop asking difficult questions. They stop challenging assumptions. They stop exploring unfamiliar ideas. Instead, they become consumers, not creators, followers, not thinkers. And that is exactly where we are today. Never before has humanity possessed so much information. Yet never before have so many people struggled to think independently. Millions read headlines, but almost nobody reads books. Millions watch 30-second videos, but few can focus for 30 minutes. People mistake information for wisdom, opinion for knowledge, confidence for competence. Machiavelli would recognize this immediately, because he knew something the modern world keeps forgetting. A crowded mind is not the same as an educated one. Imagine Machiavelli walking through our world today. He sees smartphones, artificial intelligence, social media, instant access to almost every book ever written. Would he panic? No. He would smile. Because technology itself has never been the problem. The real danger is allowing technology to replace thinking. Most people use technology to consume. A polymath uses technology to create. Most people ask AI to think for them. A polymath asks AI to challenge their thinking. That single difference changes everything. So, how do you actually become a modern polymath? Not in theory, but in real life. The answer isn't studying everything. That's impossible. The answer is learning how to connect everything. Machiavelli unknowingly followed a system that modern neuroscience now supports. Let's break it down. Lesson 1. Read across worlds. Most people stay inside one category. If they're entrepreneurs, they only read business books. If they're programmers, they only study programming. If they're psychologists, they ignore history. This creates intellectual blindness. Machiavelli read history, military strategy, poetry, religion, ancient philosophy, politics, law, because he understood that reality isn't divided into subjects. Reality is connected. Your reading should be too. Lesson 2. Study human nature, not trends. Trends expire. Algorithms change. Platforms disappear. But people remain remarkably similar. The Roman politician, the medieval king, the Wall Street executive, the social media influencer, all crave recognition, status, security, power, belonging. The clothes change. Human nature doesn't. If you understand people, you'll understand almost every industry. Lesson 3. Become comfortable being a beginner. One reason most people never become polymaths is because their ego gets in the way. They hate looking inexperienced, so they stay where they already feel competent. Machiavelli never did that. He entered unfamiliar fields with curiosity, not pride. Leonardo did the same. So did Benjamin Franklin. So did Isaac Newton. They weren't born knowing more. They simply stayed beginners. Longer than everyone else. Lesson 4. Think in principles. When news breaks, don't ask, what's happening? Ask, what timeless pattern is repeating? When businesses collapse, don't memorize the company. Study the decision-making. When relationships fail, don't focus on the people. Study human behavior. When leaders rise, study influence, not popularity. Principles outlive events. That's why Machiavelli still matters 5 centuries later. Lesson 5. Protect your attention. This may be the most valuable lesson of all. Your attention is your life. Whatever repeatedly captures it, eventually shapes your identity. Machiavelli guarded his attention like treasure. Every evening, he deliberately entered conversations with history's greatest minds. Today, most people spend those same hours scrolling endlessly. One habit builds wisdom. The other builds dependency. Every notification interrupts thought. Every interruption weakens depth. And without depth, a polymath cannot exist. Lesson 6. Write more than you consume. Machiavelli didn't become extraordinary because he read. He became extraordinary because he processed what he read. He wrote. He reflected. He questioned. Writing forces clarity. It reveals weak thinking. It exposes contradictions. A mind that only consumes eventually becomes crowded. A mind that creates becomes powerful. Lesson 7. Never stop connecting. This, more than anything else, is the heart of the polymath. When you watch a documentary, connect it to psychology. When you study history, connect it to leadership. When you learn science, connect it to philosophy. When you experience failure, connect it to growth. Every new idea should strengthen another. Knowledge should become a web, not a warehouse. Perhaps that's why Machiavelli continues to survive. Not because every idea he wrote was perfect, but because he refused to think inside artificial boundaries. He wasn't just a political writer. He was an observer of civilization, a student of power, a psychologist before psychology existed, a strategist before strategy became a discipline. He spent his life asking one question: why do humans behave the way they do? And once you begin asking that question, everything changes. Today, the world rewards speed. Machiavelli rewarded depth. The world rewards certainty. Machiavelli rewarded curiosity. The world rewards specialization. Machiavelli rewarded integration. Perhaps that's why his ideas feel even more relevant today than they did 500 years ago. Because artificial intelligence will replace many skills. It will automate repetitive work. It will memorize facts better than any human ever could. But it cannot replace genuine curiosity. It cannot replace wisdom born from lived experience. It cannot replace a mind capable of connecting philosophy, history, science, art, psychology, and human nature into one coherent understanding of reality. That is the future. When Machiavelli died in 1527, he wasn't celebrated as the genius we know today. He died without great wealth, without political power, without seeing the full impact of his work. Yet centuries later, kings studied him, generals quoted him, presidents debated him, business leaders borrowed his ideas. His body disappeared into history, but his mind never did. Because ideas, when they are powerful enough, outlive empires. So before you chase another certification, another trend, another shortcut, ask yourself one question: are you becoming more specialized? Or are you becoming harder to replace? The future will not belong to the people who know the most. It will belong to those who can connect what they know in ways no machine can. That is the path of the modern polymath. And perhaps it always has been.